Alright everybody, what we're going to do next is we are going to set up our barriers that you see in Space Invaders that allow the player to have some temporary shields that can be destroyed over time. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our player to be a little bit more like Space Invaders. This will go and help several of you who are working on the project still and haven't yet figured out how to take what we're doing here in these demos and move it over to Space Invaders. So for instance, right now our player can go ahead and move in any direction on the screen. A simple way to do that is to go ahead and select, or to stop that from happening, is to select the player, go to the rigid body, and open the constraints. And then first let's freeze the rotation of the player, just make sure that they don't get knocked around in any way. And then we're also going to go ahead and freeze their position on the y-axis. So now the player can't move up and down. They are stuck to being only on this part of the y-axis wherever we place them. If you go ahead and run the game, you should be able to move side to side, but not up and down now. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and we are going to set up our barriers. So go ahead and select the sprites folder, and then take the barrier sprite that I provided to you guys on Blackboard and drag that into the project. And we're going to go ahead and, like usual, select the barrier image. We need to split it up into its individual frames, so you'll change sprite mode to multiple. You will go ahead and change the filter mode to point, and you will apply the change. And then we're going to edit the sprite by slicing it. We're going to use the grid by cell size, and these sprites are all 64 by 32. Say slice, and then click apply, and there you go. You can see that it did indeed make it 64 by 32 is one frame. So perfect. Go ahead and run this. Now to create our barriers, we're going to create in the hierarchy a new 2D object, a sprite. We're going to call it barrier. And we are going to assign it, for its sprite, the first sprite in the barrier list. So we can expand the barrier list, grab the first one, barrier underscore 0, and for the barrier sprite, we're going to assign it to the sprite renders sprite field. I know that was saying sprite a lot. We are then going to go ahead and give it a polygon collider 2D. Now, the nice thing about polygon colliders is that they actually try to match the shape of your object. You can go ahead and hit Edit Collider over here. You can see it will allow you to start dragging around the different points of the collider and reposition them. You can also go ahead and create new points just by clicking. Let's go ahead and it's all situated. Let's undo that one. And hopefully yours ends up a lot cleaner than mine. Mine is creating a lot of unnecessary points for some reason. That's fine. Just go ahead and make sure you get it positioned how you need. Alright, so once the collider is done, we also need to go ahead and add to it a new script. Okay? So let's do that by going to the scripts folder, right-clicking, create C# script, and call it barrier controller. Barrier underscore controller. Now let's go ahead and add it to the barrier. Drag it up, add it on. We're going to select barrier now. It should have the script. Yep, there we go. So let's go ahead and let's open the barrier script so that we can edit it. Now you'll see that same script you're used to, barrier controller, name of the script, name of the file, start and update methods. Now what we're going to do here for the health of the barrier is we are going to actually count upwards, and you'll see why in a moment. So we're going to have private int health equals 0. And then public sprite array sprites. So what we're doing here is we are giving the barrier a default health of 0. We are giving it a sprite array. Okay? Those are two inputs. Now the health is private, so it can only be managed in code. The sprite array is public, so that can be managed. We save this and switch back over to Unity. See, if I click on barrier, it now on the barrier controller script has a sprites dropdown. If I select it, it wants me to tell it how large this array is. I say 4. Okay. If you look, I've got a sprite array called sprites, and it gives me a sprite array called sprites. Now once I give the array a size, it goes ahead and gives me 4 empty buckets to store them in. If you switch back to your sprite folder, take the sprites one by one and drag them into their corresponding element or index. So 0 goes to 0, 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. Alright. Now let's go ahead and switch back to code. So as soon as our project starts running, our game starts running, we want to make sure that the barrier sprite is reflecting what the current health of the player is. So we're going to go ahead and assign to the sprite renderer of the barrier to the sprite field, so the sprite field up here. We're going to assign from the sprite array the index that matches the health. Now this is why we are starting at 0. Okay? I want the health index to match the order of the sprites as they progress. Sprite 0 is full health. Sprite 1 is a little bit less. Sprite 2 is a little bit less. Sprite 3 is a little bit less. Okay? So that's why I'm using the index, because the index can correspond as I go ahead and lose health, it can go ahead and correspond to the element in the sprite array and pull the correct one. Yeah. Now, I'm going to need this line again. So when it first starts, it's going to go ahead and it's going to make sure that it correctly assigned the sprite that should be showing up, even though we manually assigned it in code. Now we're going to go ahead and set up our death conditions. Okay, so if health is greater than 3, destroy this dot game object. Okay, so once the player's health has exceeded, or the barrier's health has exceeded 3, meaning they've been hit 3 times, we want to go ahead and destroy the barrier, and then we want to exit the method. So if we call return, it'll exit it immediately. If the health isn't destroyed, or sorry, if the health doesn't get above 3 and therefore we destroy the game object, just go ahead and continue to make sure that we are drawing the sprite, whatever our current index is for the health. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and do a on collision enter 2D. Private on collision enter 2D. Collision 2D, collision. Yep. Now, anytime something collides with the barrier, we want to destroy that something. And we want to go ahead and increase our health by 1, which will go ahead and, during the update, get the next sprite in the array and assign it on screen to the sprite renderer for the barrier. Okay. Now save it, go back to Unity. The last thing we need to do is to go ahead and go up to, for the barrier, the layers, and we want to add a layer. And we're going to call this barriers. Yeah. Click on the barrier, set its layer to barriers, and now your barriers should be done. Click on the prefabs folder down here in assets, drag the barrier that you have on screen into it, and now your barrier is a prefab. You can go ahead and just keep dragging in more of them and set up the barriers of your game. Okay? The one thing we need to go ahead and do is make sure that the player and the player's bullets cannot affect the barriers. So that's why we went ahead and put the barriers on their own layer. Now we can go to Edit, Project Settings, Physics 2D. We can go down to our new Barriers column. Barriers shouldn't be able to hit barriers. Barriers shouldn't be able to hit enemy or player bullets, and barriers shouldn't be able to hit the player. So barriers can only collide with enemies and enemy bullets. Now if you go ahead and run your game at this point, your barriers should show up. It should be that when they get shot at and take damage, or they get run into, they will go ahead and slowly degrade over time. You can see that there. That takes one, bullet hit at the same time. And there you go. Now we have barriers.